Daredevil Born Again Season 2 featured the return of Jessica Jones and Luke Cage, two OGs from the Defenders era, and we know old Danny Rand's Iron Fist will be returning as well. So with Matt Murdock now in prison and these three Defenders returning to the streets of New York in Born Again Season 3, what can we expect to happen next? Hey everybody, Colton here, and Daredevil Born Again Season 3 is filming right now, and after that absolutely phenomenal season that we just got, I know we're all excited to see what's next. We've got Punisher's special presentation coming next week, there's also Spider-Man Brand New Day coming in July, and I just did a video about what we can expect next for characters like Daredevil, Kingpin, and Bullseye. But now we need to talk about the alleged stars of Born Again Season 3, the Defenders. Leaker My Time to Shine Hello recently reported that Born Again Season 3's first half will feel very much like a Defenders Season 2. And in case you don't know, the Defenders, that was the limited series over on Netflix, but now on Disney Plus, where we saw Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist, all who had their own individual shows, then have their big team-up crossover moment where we saw them come together to fight the Hand. And now, with Daredevil Born Again having fully embraced its past, not just its own prior seasons, but its sister shows as well, it looks like Marvel really is about to reform the Defenders and readapt the old way that they used to make Marvel television. And I think I know exactly how this is all going to be handled in Born Again Season 3, what they'll do next, and how these characters are going to fit into the wider MCU, and how they will connect to things like mutants and even Spider-Man. So today's Ask Colton question comes to us from Thomas. Thomas writes, will Daredevil Born Again Season 3 be a Daredevil in name only type season, with Matt being in prison, Kingpin being in exile, and the Defenders taking center stage? All right, great question, and look, I think that if Marvel wants to bring the Defenders back, that is awesome. Let's do it. And I'm going to tell you a little later in the video why I'm so glad that they are embracing that era of Marvel's past. I really do think that they are doing it the right way by not just, coming out of the gate, oh, we're doing another season of Luke Cage, we're doing another season Jessica Jones, we're doing another season Iron Fist, we're doing another, like a season 2 of the Defenders. No, I don't think that would have been the right way to go about it. I think simply from a marketing perspective, it's just smart that they first lay the groundwork and reintroduce these characters in Daredevil. What I think we are going to see happen in Born Again Season 3 is something very much like we saw in the show Better Call Saul. The show is called Better Call Saul, but it's just as much a show about Mike Ehrmantraut and his story with Gustavo Fring. Now, I tell you all of this because I recently theorized that they could do that with Daredevil Born Again Season 3. The Daredevil show has pretty much always had two co-leads, Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, and they are co-leads who very rarely share much screen time together. So with Matt now in prison and Wilson Fisk on the outside, you could tell us these two completely separate stories, Matt living his life in prison and meeting criminals that he put there, and then Fisk on the outside doing his thing, trying to figure out what his next move will be, etc. And you could go back and forth between these two stories and not really realize any crossover between them until like the middle of the season or toward the finale. And you can also do this with the Defenders. You can have a Defenders storyline where they are trying to fill the shoes of the incarcerated Daredevil. And if the show is taking place around the same time as Spider-Man Brand New Day, which I think it is, despite, it being released after Avengers Doomsday, and the period in which Spider-Man Brand New Day will be taking place in this post Daredevil Born Again Season 2 New York, I think it could be really interesting for the Defenders story because vigilantes and superheroes, they are going to be in a bit of a Renaissance type era, I think, during that period. We see Spider-Man getting the key to the city. We see Punisher patrolling the streets in his van. We could see the Defenders being really embraced as New York's new protectors. We could have Jessica Jones investigating like a new threat. Luke Cage returning to assess the current state of New York's criminal underground and the different gangs and the power vacuum left behind by Fisk. And then Danny Rand, he could be back in New York to deal with the Hand, the same ninjas they fought in the Defenders series and who are now once again in New York in Spider-Man Brand New Day in a prison, likely the same prison that Matt Murdock is in. Hell, maybe all the Defenders will join Spider-Man to help go protect Matt from the Hand in Brand New Day. I'm also kind of digging the idea of the hand not even being there to hurt Matt, but to break Matt out of prison, not to kill him, but maybe at the request of Matt's old love interest, Elektra, who can now be leading the hand, because I think she's totally alive, and it's been rumored that she is back for season 3, and she was, of course, in the Defenders as well, so it all just, ties together nicely. So to answer your question, no, I don't think we're going to see Daredevil take a back seat in his own show any more than we already have. I mean, hell, I was reading a report a few days ago, I think, talking about how little screen time Daredevil had in season 2. And not that it was little, like in the fact of like, oh, we're missing Daredevil, what the hell? But just like you would kind of be surprised at the percentage in which Daredevil Born Again Season 2 actually had Daredevil on screen. And I think that's okay. I'm all for having an ensemble cast. And I like the idea of a show being a bit of a just an ensemble story where, of course, Daredevil is the title character, but there's plenty of room for a supporting cast of characters that don't just have to be like random smaller name characters. Let the Defenders, let these bigger names be big parts of a show, just like Frank Castle's Punisher has been like a main character in Daredevil. And the show didn't have to be called Daredevil and Punisher. It can just be the Daredevil show. And we've got these other huge names in it. I think that can work. And I think that's what we're really leading into with this mutant saga, where I think we're also going to kind of be in the team era of the MCU on the big screen as well, because you're going to have the X-Men movies. I think we're going to have Avengers movies that feel more like even a smaller type story than Age of Ultron, where it's just the team of Avengers on a mission instead of it being like this big, calamity, like end of the world type thing, saga capper, phase capper type of story, just an Avengers movie. We'll have the Fantastic Four, who's going to be a team. I think we're going to have an X-Force movie. So the same could be true for when you're doing a Daredevil season. It feels like a bit of an ensemble team type thing, because I think the MCU is going into its ensemble era. And I think you kind of have to when you have as many characters as they do and that they're clearly wanting to introduce. And I want to be clear about something. I am all for one big MCU where the movies and shows are one universe. But I have to admit that I really did like it when the Defenders and like the Daredevil stuff from the Netflix era were in the MCU, but very loosely. Like they were their own thing. And I think Marvel made a mistake by trying to make Marvel movies and Marvel shows just interchangeable and so closely connected and like required viewing for one another. I want a small screen MCU where characters like Daredevil, Punisher, Kingpin, the Defenders, White Tiger, any other heroes they want on the small screen, and do these Disney Plus series of like, maybe the Champions. I want them to just have their own interconnected stories that is almost like an MCU 2. It exists in the MCU, the movie universe, but it's its own thing where where like the shows have more crossover with each other and the movies have more crossover with each other than the movies and shows do with each other. Do you like my visual here? And I'm fine for like occasionally having characters jump between big and small screen, like Punisher, having him be in the shows like Daredevil and then also pop up in Spider-Man. I think that's fine. But I think for the most part, movie characters need to be in movies and TV characters need to be in TV. Take a character like Miss Marvel. She started as a TV character and then they put her in a movie. And I don't know if they have plans to do a season 2 of her show, but I personally kind of hope not, because I think they need to decide which she is going to be. Is she a TV character or is she a movie character? And let her thrive at whichever it is. And I think the answer for her is clear, that she needs to be in the movies. But then you've got a character like, say, Kate Bishop Hawkeye, and despite her being played by a movie star like Haley Steinfeld, I think that character might actually be a really good fit for this New York street level interconnected story that's going to be told on the small screen, and have her have run-ins with like the Defenders and another fight with the Kingpin. That could all be really cool. And I know I'm kind of rambling at this point. I swear I'll get back to the point of why I think what is like next for Born Again Season 3 and the Defenders is such a smart choice. But what I'm really just trying to say is that Marvel, I think, made a mistake when they got into the TV game again. And it was really Marvel Studios' first time at getting into the TV game with their, WandaVision, which is a great show, Loki, great show. But then they had some stinkers, right? Like Secret Invasion. I think they made a mistake by having the movies and the shows be so closely connected and like interchangeable, because I think what you end up doing then is you hurt both. I think you hurt a movie by having shows be required viewing. I think you hurt a show by having movies be required viewing. I think a show like Daredevil, it thrives when it is allowed to be a show and doesn't have to have like interruptions where the characters go play in a movie or have to be closely tied to the overall storyline of the movies. And I don't think that you have movie characters go play in a TV show between big screen appearances. I like the idea of just a cohesive, clear vision for a movie, a cinematic universe, and then a small screen universe that has a cohesive, clear vision. And they're all in the same reality, the same universe, but have them operate metaphorically and literally on different levels of the MCU. You've got your Avengers Tower level where the movies happen and on up into space from there for like cosmic level movies. Well, your smaller budget, more drawn out stories can take place down in the streets, down in the underbelly. And those can be found on the small screen, not because they're lesser stories, not because they're not as good. In a lot of cases, they're even better than some of the movies. But the reason you do that is because they're just different. And you can tell those types of stories with a lower budget, and just certain stories work better in certain mediums. I think investigative, like trial, that's like a Jessica Jones thing where she is investigating something, or Matt Murdock is having like this ongoing trial or whatever. Those certain stories I think worked better on the small screen. And I think the Netflix era where Marvel Studios wasn't really involved with that at all. You had Marvel Television, and I know Ike Perlmutter was over that, but I don't think he really had any creative control over that. I guess he just had some really good people working for him. They had this really like successful and beloved MCU adjacent MCU known as like the Defenders verse or the Netflix verse that had Daredevil and Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Iron Fist. And it was really popular and successful. And I'm glad that they're moving back in that direction and that they have embraced not only those characters in that past, but also just that way of doing things. I'm glad they're back on that path of making Marvel TV like TV instead of just throwing your movie characters onto Disney Plus, which is what they were doing. They were like, oh, we're going to do Marvel TV shows? Okay, well, let's just take some movie stuff from them. We'll take some movie characters and throw them on Disney Plus for a movie that feels like it was cut up into 6 or 8 episodes. And I say that as someone who really like WandaVision, really like Loki. They were great. But then you got shows like Secret Invasion and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which should have been the 4th Captain America movie. But those really do just feel like chopped up movies, leaving you wondering where the budget went and why it felt so cheap and anticlimactic and drawn out, not in a good way. It was weird seeing Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury on a fucking Disney Plus show. It was weird seeing Bucky and Sam, the new Captain America, after the second biggest movie in the world in Avengers Endgame, being given the shield, and his next story is relegated to a miniseries on a streaming service? Stop trying to make these characters exist in 2 very different mediums, and instead have your movie characters and have your TV characters thrive on their own turfs instead of half-assing them and stretching them across both shows and movies and throwing them every which way. This full embrace of the Defenders into Daredevil and the future of Marvel Television, I think, is a really good sign that they are getting back to doing things how the original Marvel Television used to do them. And I think that's a really good sign for the future of Marvel on TV, as well as the MCU on the big screen. So yeah, that's what I think is next for Born Again Season 3. Yes, the Defenders are back. Yes, it's going to feel very Defenders Season 2 probably. But no, I don't think Daredevil is going to be like, sidelined or anything. He's going to be the main character of the show, of course, but they're going to do the same thing they've done with Punisher, the same thing they've done with Kingpin, as the villain of the show. But they're going to let us have a strong supporting cast, just like, Karen and Foggy were big, characters in that show. You can have the same thing with Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Iron Fist. Have them be big characters in that show. Just because they're superheroes who have had their own show doesn't mean that they're, necessarily stealing anything from Daredevil. No, have them have just as much screen time and character development and stories as we've seen Karen and Foggy have. You can do the exact same thing. So just because I feel like we tend to think, oh, well, Karen and Foggy, you would never have a Karen Page show or a Foggy Nelson show. So of course you put them in Daredevil and they do their thing there. Well, I think the same can be true even with a character like Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist. You can have them be supporting cast in a Daredevil show and still tell really great stories and have them feel like they are getting enough time and attention, and while simultaneously not taking anything from Daredevil. All right, thanks so much for watching. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified every time I upload a new video. I've been Colton Ogburn. I'll see you next time. Bye!